put the light there so we can, go ahead.
As you can see from the start of the video, there's definitely some issues that I had with the Cobra. I'm going to go in a little bit more depth on what was discovered with the car, what's wrong with it, and how it's being addressed, and basically how you just don't know what's done to these cars until you really start to dig into them. This course goes for the ones that have passed through a few hands and have decent to mild mileage on them compared to very low owner ones and ones with very low mileage. But when you get into these cars where a couple different hands have touched it, sometimes you end up with things like this. Now, before I get into the big explanation on exactly what was found and why my tank looks like that, I wanted to focus on one thing first, and that was the comparison of everything I've dealt with Cobra Dan versus what I dealt with when my Cobra was with DRK Performance and Aaron Carvalho with the red Terminator. It's basically polar opposites. Aaron's a useless piece of shit, and I'm glad DRK Performance is gone. And he's a con artist and horrible businessman, and he ripped people off, he ripped me off. I have a whole video on how that happened. This was the first time that I met Cobra Dan when I brought my Sonic Blue Terminator down to him just a few weeks ago. And he's been excellent. His communication, every single day he has texted or called, explained everything that he found that was issues with it. He's just been great. If you live in the New England area and are looking for someone to bring your Terminator to, highly recommend Cobra Dan. The guy is top-notch, excellent in my opinion. As far as what was going on with the tank, from what Dan had told me, the pumps that were in the Cobra, and I'll get to the pumps, that's a whole other topic that I have to get into. The hat for the pumps was drilled, bigger holes in the hat for whatever reason. He had no idea why, but the hat had been drilled, and because of that happening, we believe that moisture was let into the tank, and as you can see, there was a ton of rust that was in my tank. That rust in the tank caused a whole bunch of other problems with the car. Now, when I say that, the car drove fine. You would never have guessed that there was something wrong with the car, other than the fact that I didn't have enough fuel pump when I brought it to the dyno. That was the whole reason for bringing the car down to Cobra Dan, was to get the 4 hat and the 4 GT improved supercar pumps put in. And that was the whole main reason for doing it. There's a bunch of stuff that was found wrong, including the tank, which the tank I'll explain now, then I'll get into the other stuff. So with that moisture getting in the tank, I had rust in the tank. You can see the bottom of the socks on the fuel pumps that they were plugged with rust. The pumps that were in the car were not stock. When I had the car on the dyno at Performance Dyno before it closed down, he had told me that they are stock pumps from what he was seeing for the flow numbers and everything that he saw for data on his laptop. And I'm not saying anything bad about Pete at all. He had no idea what was in the tank, but the issue was those pumps were probably clogged with so much rust that they were not flowing like they should have been flowing. They're aftermarket pumps that were in there already, and I was told by not the guy I bought the car from, but a previous owner before that individual, that the pumps had been done in the car, but according to Pete on the dyno, the pumps were stock. Well, the pumps were done, but they were clogged with rust. So I had this whole problem of aftermarket pumps that were in the car, but they were not getting the flow that they needed, probably because they were clogged. I don't know that 100% for sure, but from what Dan told me, he said they're an older style pump, so maybe they just can't keep up with the power output that I'm getting with the Whipple, where the car sits now at its current power level. Maybe it's because they were clogged with rust, maybe the socks are clogged, maybe my filter was completely gummed up with rust. Who knows? It's one of those things that were causing the numbers that Pete was seeing on the dyno for why the car was not putting out the numbers that it could have with the proper fuel pumps, and for the flow numbers that the pumps were actually getting according to what he was seeing on his laptop. So due to the rust in the tank, I was forced to buy another 03-04 Cobra tank. I'm going to try and get this one cleaned up so that I can hopefully resell it at some point. There's things you can do to really clean the tank out, get all that rust out, and then coat it on the inside so it's fine. But with the time frame that we really had and the amount of work that it would take to do that, it was just easier to get another tank. Although it was quite expensive, it was $700 to purchase another tank through Blue Water, which I found through eBay. So that was an added expense that I wasn't really planning on doing. Hopefully I can recoup some money back by reselling this one later on at a later date once I get it all flushed out and back to good condition again. Now before I forget, I'm going to stay focused on the fuel thing before I get into the other stuff. One positive out of all this, I showed everyone in a previous video of all the parts that are being taken down there and all the things that were being done. My intention was to have a dual fuel pressure driver module setup done. That's what I was thinking that Dan wanted to do with the car. I got extremely lucky and he was able to get me a black 306. And it's really hard to get these now. The guy that makes them, from what I could tell on his website, he wasn't doing them anymore. So that's why I didn't pursue that avenue anymore. I decided just to go with the dual fuel pressure driver module route. Turns out that he did have some black 306 units left. From what Dan said, I got one of the last ones that he still had available. So the car will have a black 306, which is excellent. That's what I really wanted to do from the start. I just didn't think that was an option at all anymore. Now, as far as some of the other problems that I found with the car, that I didn't find, that Dan found while I was there, I already knew that my brakes were junk. I knew that from the very beginning. I've talked about the brake setup that I wanted to do in another video as well, because I knew the rotors were trash, the pads were trash, and he confirmed that. It still actually surprisingly stops pretty well, but everything is junk. It needs to be redone, and that's why I'm redoing it with a new brake setup over the winter months. Other stuff that he found, it's more wear and tear items. You have a car that's been driven, and it's going to have stock components that wear out. My toe links are completely trashed, and my sway bar end links were completely trashed. So both of those have been upgraded with FTBR units, which I'm grateful for. I would prefer to have more suspension upgrades done, especially in the IRS department of the car. So I'm not that upset that those units were completely worn out and needed to be replaced. Now I have new components in there that are much better than OEM to begin with, and that should help with the general driving characteristics of the car as well. One of the other issues with the car too that I forgot to mention a little while ago was that the ball joints were shot on. Those were replaced, so the car should just be so much better now with the suspension stuff done, new ball joints, and it should just be a much better car than when I brought it down there. One of the other problems that he found, he was draining the coolant out of the intercooler system. I needed to have that flushed because when I brought it to the dyno, I had a big air pocket in there. Pete didn't have any coolant on hand, so he dumped a bunch of water in there. So I wanted Dan to drain the coolant system and just have all coolant in there, because the last thing I wanted to have happen was to go to start this car in the springtime after a really cold winter up here and have the water in there freeze and crack my intercooler brick or something like that. So it would just be better just to have all new fluid in there. And when he did that, he was draining the coolant system, and my thermostat came out in 3 pieces. It fell in the pan. I'll throw a video picture up now where it came out in 3 different pieces. And he texted me and asked if I had any issues with the car overheating or if the heat was working at all. And I said I used the heat that morning that I brought it down there because it was cold that morning, and I always kept an eye on the temperature on the gauge that I have, the separate gauge for the coolant temperature, and I never had any issues with it. So I was lucky in the sense that the thermostat was still working, but the thing was done anyway. So there'll also be a new thermostat going on. One of the other issues that I had with the car, not necessarily the car itself, but with the cab back system that I bought, I didn't notice this really early on when I got the broiler stingers. I bought those quite a while ago, earlier this year, like around springtime. And the intent was to have those put on with cats on the car. That was the plan. It turns out I didn't even think of this. Dan brought this up to me before I brought the car down. I kind of spaced it as far as this kind of a modification. But if I were to do the cats on the car, it would need to be retuned before Miss Dinah was closed, so I don't have that option right now. So we opted not to do the cats. So that's why I held on to the broiler stingers for as long as I did, because I didn't want to put them on without having the cats done at the same time. But I can't do the cats now. Those will have to wait till a later date. Back to the beginning, when I first bought the cab back, the muffler section, I didn't look at that very closely. I took that section of the exhaust system, put that down in the basement, and kind of forgot about it. The only thing I was really focused on was polishing the tips and the part that you see underneath the tank on the 0304 Cobra. That was my intent, was to get them polished up really well, which I've done. So I kind of ignored the muffler section for quite a long time. When I went to take these down to Dan, I noticed that the muffler section, where it connects to the tailpipe section, had a huge dent in it, and it was basically a D-shaped on the end of it. I tried to get that out with a pipe expander. I couldn't get it. It kept deforming the expander, and it didn't have enough pressure to push that pipe out. Dan took it to somewhere, and they said they didn't think they could get it to the shape they wanted to get it and still get a good seal on the tailpipe. So I'm fine with that, because I'm going to take it to a few different places around me that deal specifically with mufflers and all this stuff. Hopefully that pipe can be pushed out so the tailpipe can go on there and seal properly. If not, I'm going to see if I can have that end section cut off and a new section welded on, and hopefully that will work. That's an option that I'm looking at if that pipe can't be expanded to the point where it will seal correctly. I didn't really want Dan to spend too much time on it. So I'm getting the Cobra back with the same Poseidon cab back that was on it that I went down there with. So it's kind of a bummer, but I didn't expect this issue to come up with the broiler stingers. I should have looked over the cab back better when I got it. I didn't realize that dent was that bad, or that it was even there, because it was on the section that I just threw down in the basement and forgot about until I put everything in the car to take it down there to get done. So that's something I'll have to resolve once I get the car back. As far as when I'm getting the car back, I'm recording this on Halloween, so pretty close to when you guys are going to watch it. A few issues came up on Dan's end as far as getting the car back when I wanted to. I plan on getting it Monday or Tuesday after this weekend. That probably won't happen. It's no big deal. I'm not upset about anything. Where it's going to be November by the time I get the car back anyway, whether I got it when I planned on it or a little bit later on. But Dan had some things on his end which is kind of delaying it a little bit. But as far as the car, everything's done. He just needs to take it out for a few shakedown runs and make sure everything is fine before it gets its stamp of approval, and then I'll be able to go down there and get it. So, you know, mechanically everything is all put back together and done. The springs are in it. It has the H&R race springs in it now. Sits much better than it did before. I'm trying to avoid dragging my long tubes. Up here the roads are terrible in some areas, and I just really don't want to drag those long tubes anymore. I hit it a few times a few weeks ago, pretty bad, and I want to avoid that. So the H&R Sport Springs came out. H&R Race ones with the isolators went in, and it sits much better now. That's the thumbnail I used for the video, and I throw that photo up again if you guys want to see it again. So the car sits much better. I'll throw in a couple of comparison videos for the gap that was in the front and rear wheel and how much better it sits now. It's kind of a not a side-on shot, but once I get the car back here, I'll do a video and show you guys how that looks now as compared to what I did before. I still plan on getting the car in about another week to a week and a half is kind of the time frame I'm looking at right now. It's no big deal. It's going to be November up here. It's going to be getting cold. I won't be driving the car anyway, so whether I get it back beginning of next week or a week and a half, 2 weeks from now, it's either way, it's fine. I'm not too worried about it. So that's the update on the Cobra. It should be coming back in much better shape than what it was. I'm glad Dan was able to find out all these issues that I had with the car, with the sway bar end links and the toe links, and being upgraded with the FTBR stuff. That's much better option than the worn out stock stuff that was on it. As far as getting in the car on the dyno, I will be getting a dyno again. It'll be next spring though. It's going to be pretty far off from you guys watch this video, but the car will have a tune in there for the pumps that are in there, and so it will be safe to drive and everything. But I just want to get it on the dyno to see what numbers it will put out with the proper fueling. So maybe I'll break 700. We'll see, but I'm going to dump some Torco in there, so either way I'm going to break 700. I'll do another video on the car once I get it back. I'll give my impressions on how it drives and handles with the springs and with the toe end links and sway bar end links upgraded and everything. Hopefully it should feel a lot tighter, a lot stiffer. So I'll do a review on that once it comes back, and the ride quality of the H&R race springs versus the sport springs that were on it before. But that will conclude this video. I'm going to try and plug away through some content through the winter months. I have some ideas for stuff that I can do. But if you did make it this far in the video, make sure to leave it a like. But above all else, thanks for watching.